After 32 years of silence, motor racing has returned to Goodwood. Legendary drivers and cars from all over the world are gathered in Sussex, reliving the sport's golden age and creating fresh memories for a whole new generation. Good afternoon to you. Who says time travel doesn't exist? This is Goodwood 1998, restored in almost every detail to its glory days when it held its last meeting 32 long years ago in 1966. Now, it's taken 6 long years of hard work to get this track back to the pristine condition in which it used to be. In fact, if I'm honest, it's probably better now than it was then. Well, ahead of us on what should be a really cracking programme, 2 marvellous races, historic cars, and, let me whisper it, some historic drivers as well. We'll also be chatting to some very famous faces. Hi. You can hardly move 10 yards here without bumping into a legend, whether it's a world champion or just a very familiar looking car enthusiast. But then that was always the case. Back in the 40s, 50s and 60s, Goodwood was one of Britain's most important circuits. It had played a key role in our rise to the top of the sport. Crowds of up to 50,000 were thrilled by the greatest drivers. Stars like Juan Manuel Fangio, who won the World Championship 5 times. Graham Hill, father, of course, of young Damon. The brilliant Jim Clark, and of course Stirling Moss. Now, he won his first ever race at Goodwood's opening meeting, and that was 50 years ago this very weekend. Now, I know you want to know what's on the programme today, therefore I'll tell you. Our feature races, the Glover Trophy, 21 laps, 1.5 litre Formula 1 cars. Not today's, though, these are real ones. They're from 1961 to 1965. Listen to the names of those cars: Brabham Climax, Cooper Climax, Alfa Romeo, Lola and Lotus. After that, the Lavant Cup. 21 laps again. It's the spirit of the RAC TT races from the late 50s. Aston Martins, Ferrari Dinos, Jaguars, Maseratis. And when I just throw in the name of an exciting driver like Stirling Moss, you'll know jolly well we're in for a real cracking programme. Well, that's the scene outside. Stirling and I are in an air-conditioned studio. It's absolutely wonderful here, but boy, oh boy, is it noisy. But then again, it's motorsport. It's bound to be noisy. Stirling Moss, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Now, you're hotter than ever in your racing overalls.
I'm not as hot as I'm going to be in the next lot of overalls because they've got to be legal. Now for the modern drivers, they don't want to get hurt, so they have to wear these fireproof ones. These are the old ones. These are lovely.
You look absolutely wonderful. The first thing I have to say, this is real motorsport, isn't it, today?
This is really great. The public can come in, they can meet the drivers, see the cars. It's very free. There's tremendous atmosphere. Everybody's happy. It's on a high. The weather's great. You know, it couldn't be better.
Now, you're no stranger to Goodwood. A potted history. You started way back when?
Oh, 48. I won my first race here in a 500cc car, which was Formula 3 then. I terminated it on Bank Holiday Easter in 1962 when unfortunately I had a very bad shunt, 140 miles an hour, unconscious for a month, paralysed for 6. But I'm back here again.
All right, we've just seen you driving around in a car, waving to the crowd. I mean, everybody is enjoying it. I have never known such an exciting motor racing meeting.
It is remarkable. But the people, they seem to have, everybody's fallen in with this fact, you know, it's the rejuvenation of a great circuit. It's a wonderful place here.
All right, all the old cars, people all dress up in the old clothing. And you were telling me before we started about a post van?
Oh yeah, unbelievable. The local postman has just been given a van for a day, or maybe 2, 1950 to deliver his mail. And you know, people don't know about this, but this guy's going around 1950 van arriving, you know, in a Morris, whatever it was. Fantastic.
Right, 6 years hard work has put this course back together again. Have the people here managed to capture the spirit of your day, if I can call it that?
The circuit itself is identical, absolutely the same. I mean, the chicane, except they made the chicane now, it's a bit, the chicane's made of polystyrene, I believe, but it used to be brick, so you didn't want to hit it. But the circuit is exactly as it was, and all the adverts, with the exception of one, that's the RAC. The RAC have decided to bring in their new logo, which anyway is pretty awful, instead of going back to the old one. But Shell have gone back to the old one. All the other people. And do you see this one?
I was going to ask you, what's all the hay baling going on? I mean, that's just yards off the track.
That is, yes, it's about 25 feet back. But that happened, and there they were, these stooks, don't you call them, and that's the way it was. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. That is actually going on now on the circuit. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. You know, fantastic.
I mean, just very briefly, because we've got other things to do, but when you were driving around, you see these fellas making these hay bales?
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, this is the way it was, and he hasn't changed it. His grandfather, you know, Charles March's grandfather, is the one who started this. Right. And my goodness, Charles March has done an unbelievable job. All right, people always suspected you weren't keeping your eye on the road. Now we know you're watching the haymakers. Well, I was looking for the girls, actually, amongst the hay.
Don't say that. Stirling Moss, stay with us. We'll be talking to Stirling as we go through the programme. I'm also hoping that Derek Bell will be joining us a little later on. Now, there's more people here than just Stirling Moss and I, of course. You might recognise a couple of them. Simon Taylor and someone called Murray Walker are our race commentators for the afternoon. They've already been out and about, and I think now we can join Murray down by the grid area.
Welcome to Goodwood. Once in every lifetime, something so magical happens to you that you have to pinch yourself to believe it's true. And for 4 days now, I have been on the verge of tears of sheer joy at being at this Goodwood Revival. The Earl of March and his team have done an absolutely fantastic job bringing the circuit back to life again. The weather has been superb. They've got some of the finest cars in the world here, and the racing has been absolutely unbelievable. It's a cult occasion. And Simon Taylor and I are very happy and honoured to be here. What's Goodwood mean to you, Simon?
Well, Goodwood really goes back to the magic thing that happened in my life when I came here first on Easter Monday 1956. And as I walked into the paddock here on Friday morning in the sunshine, it was as though the years had rolled away. It's not only the cars, it's also the people, because so many of the people who were great then are here now. A few of them sadly are missing, but so many of them are here. And the other thing that's here is that magical Goodwood atmosphere, which no other circuit quite had, but somehow Lord March has recreated that too. And it's that really makes the pricking start in the back of your eyes.
Absolutely, and there's no doubt about it that it's going to get better and better from now on. In fact, the best is yet to come.
Well, there's been emotion all the way through the weekend. This was the scene as the circuit was officially opened. 3 Ferraris led by the same blue Bristol driven by Charles March that his grandfather, the then Duke of Richmond and Gordon, used to open the circuit. Then we had the central band of the Royal Air Force marching up and down the start-finish straight, all the crowds drinking in the atmosphere, and of course Spitfires flying overhead. And as Lord March and his wife and children watched, Canon Lionel Webber, the chaplain to the Queen, the chaplain to the British Racing Drivers Club, came forward to bless the track. And it is the same track that we've had ever since 1948.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And we pray that all who race here, all who watch, all who work, that coming together, the beauty of this sport, in the beauty of this place, may redound to your glory, now and always. Amen.
It's a very, very special weekend, the sort of weekend that you remember all your life. Lord and Lady March there with Canon Lionel Webber and the Spitfires flying overhead to remind us that before Goodwood became a motor racing circuit 50 years ago this weekend in 1948, it was a wartime airfield. Everybody dressed appropriately to watch the overhead air display. During the war, the airfield was built, and it was from here that some of the few flew to help defend our island during the dark days of World War II, and all of those being remembered here. Not only motor racing from 1948 to 1966, but also the wartime role played by Goodwood, played by West Hampton Airfield, and even a Messerschmitt overhead to remind us that it was a serious fight. The Spitfires overhead, beautifully flown by people who really understand how to make these wonderful old aircraft work. Spitfires, Mustangs, Messerschmitts, the Spitfires coming over impossibly low in a glorious display, and that Messerschmitt being chased away.
Well, I hope by now you're beginning to believe me when I say this is a very exciting, truly nostalgic meeting. I'm live in our studio with Stirling Moss. It's just families everywhere you look. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really true, because the kids, of course, haven't had the opportunity of seeing cars like these, because they're really beautiful cars, and they love to come along and look at them, talk to the mechanics, talk to the drivers, and not only the kids, I mean, their mums and dads and grandfathers and so on. You'd be amazed how many people have come up to me and said, oh, Granddad was here, and so on, in the early days. Makes me feel quite old, but still.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you are old, aren't you? I mean, birthday the other day.
Yes,
I won't give your age away, but your next one will be 70. I mean,
no, you let it out of the bag, yes.
Happy birthday for that. Now, what memories have you got here? I mean, you had some cracking times racing here, didn't you?
Oh, wonderful memories, because they had the TT here at the end, and I won the TT in 1960 and 61. And they also had a Goodwood 9 Hours, which I remember very well, because one of the cars caught fire, and we had to take over another one of the team, and managed to win with that, with an Aston Martin. Actually, it's car I'm going to drive in the next race, and the actual vehicle. And talking about the actual vehicles, the modern historics are actually obviously better than they were, because people have had all that much time and they've lavished the love, and instead of getting it ready for races, they've been preparing it, and they're really fantastic.
We're just looking at shots of good old John Surtees in one of his
Well,
cars there.
now that's a Vanwall he's in there.
The camaraderie that you guys still have is so strong, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we all belong to a thing called the Ancien Pilote, which doesn't mean ancient, it just means, you know, those of yesteryear, if you're a factory member, and the drivers have we had such a fantastic relationship with one to the other. I mean, it isn't like it is now. I mean, we'd go out shopping together and have meals together, and we'd travel around from one race to another, you know, from here to Silverstone down to Rome, whatever, and all the time it was really very sociable, you know.
Last question, if I may. How competitive were you? You were all so friendly, but still competitive?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You mean then?
Yes.
Even now, boy, we're going to go out there, I want to beat John. But then, yes, you better believe it. Oh, very competitive. Very
all right, well, enjoy the meeting, and thanks for your time. Great to have you in again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Stirling Moss, one of my heroes. I told you that while he wasn't on camera to save his blushes. Now, it's not only racing, there's aeroplanes, there's bands, and there's a colossal number of people around this circuit. And Dave Beckett is our lucky reporter. He's out and about with the cameras, bumping into all sorts of people.
Down in the assembly area is the organiser, Lord March. Your vision has come true. Is it a dream or a nightmare at the moment?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. It lurches from one to the other. We have moments of thinking this is a bit of a dream, and you know, I can't believe it's actually happening. But other moments where it's very real indeed and very horrible. But no, it's going very well. And it's fantastic.
How much work has gone into this?
Well, a huge amount, really. We started negotiating about 6 years ago to try and get the permission to do all this, and eventually that happened. And we've been, I suppose, 18 months doing all this work. It's been a very, very tight programme to get it finished in time.
Have perhaps even you been surprised at how good it all looks in the end?
Well, I'm very pleased that when you have all these ideas and you start putting them all together, you don't ever really think that they're all going to kind of join up, you know, and this is kind of all joined up. And, you know, you go into the paddock, it's reasonably seamless. You see the cars in the right setting with people wearing, you know, mechanics in nice white overalls, and you do your photography and take your pictures and make your film, and it all looks, you know, like it should.
You were a child when the circuit closed. Does this fit pretty much with the memory that you had?
Well, yeah, I guess I remember it with rose-tinted glasses a bit, but it was so wonderful being down here with all the drivers then and my grandfather, and you know, being part of it and being taken around into the pits and all that stuff, that it was, you know, it was the highlight of my year.
How do you think your grandfather would have felt to see this?
I think you think we were all absolutely crazy, actually. No, I hope you know, I hope he'd be very pleased.
I hope it's an enjoyable weekend for you.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that's the scene now, this beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon. Coming up on the programme, Damon Hill in action. He's besieged by autograph hunters everywhere he goes. We're going to see Damon back in his first love of racing. He used to be a motorbike courier rider. He's going to be back on a bike, taking on his all-time hero, Barry Sheene. Don't you dare miss that one. Wonderful weekend. This is the third day of 3, and as we said earlier, reporter David Beckett is bumping into all sorts of people. He met one of his close personal friends yesterday. Here's Dave Beckett with Rowan Atkinson.
I did quite a lot of racing about 10 years ago in Renault 5 Turbos, but I've done very little since because no one would actually allow me to do motor racing while I was working. but most of this year I've done no work whatsoever. So it means that I've been able to do this kind of thing.
And of course, you're far too young to remember Goodwood first time around, aren't you? Are you impressed with what you've seen?
Well, I am, yes. I mean, it's just this astonishing detailed recreation of how it was in 1948, or between those periods of 1948 to 66. And I said to the Earl of March yesterday, I thought it was indicative of a kind of insanity, really, this absolute infatuation and obsessive attention to period detail. But I have to say, it's the kind of insanity which I admire hugely. And I think the uncompromising way with which the Earl of March has pursued his very ambitious vision, I think is completely admirable.
It's almost like being on a film set, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is completely theatrical. So in theory, I should feel very comfortable here. And he's done it remarkably well. I just hope that he can sort of maintain it in future years. That's going to be the interesting thing as to whether next year, the year after, and the year after that, whether he will be able to capture the spirit again. But I think that at least he showed the way. He showed how it can be done, and he's done it extremely well.
Well, thanks very much for talking to us. Have a wonderful weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dave Beckett, of course, with Rowan Atkinson. Now, as I said, this is the third day of 3 here at Goodwood. Glorious weather. Let me just tell you about some of these nostalgic cars we're about to see. Listen to these names: Cooper Bristol, Alfa Romeo, Ferraris, Maserati and Talbots. You wonder what I'm talking about? It's the Woodcote Cup, a wonderful race yesterday. We're going to start with the action of the cars on the grid. These are cars that were raced between 1948 and 1953. Our commentator, Simon Taylor.
The field now coming into position for the start of the Woodcote Cup. 15 laps, the first race at Goodwood since 1966. And we wait to see what has happened to the 158 Alpha, which should be on pole position. I don't see Willie Green's 158 Alpha. That's a shame. We've just got the Cooper Bristol and the ERA, Remus on the front row. No Willie Green. So that means Roddick McPherson has the road clear. They get underway. A great start from Ludovic Lindsay in the ERA. And the BRM V16 gets away, but Ludovic Lindsay has the lead. It's Ludovic Lindsay leading, with Roddy McPherson moving into second place, and Gregor Fiskin has come up into third place. It's ERA from Cooper Bristol as they go through Madgwick on the first of 15 laps, on towards the fast right-hand curve of Fallwater, and down now to the treacherously bumpable left-hander at St Mary's. And the ERA, built in 1938, leads the Cooper Bristols, built in 1952. The ERA is always very quick, 1.5 litres, twin-stage supercharged. The E-Type ERA well down, but now Ludovic Lindsay pulling away. Roddy McPherson making a little gap between himself and the third man, which is Gregor Fiskin, as they come now up to Lavant, a long, bumpy, double right-hander. Into the pits now comes Rick Hall with the V16 BRM. Ludovic Lindsay leads in the famous Remus ERA, the ex-Birabongzi car, still running in the blue and yellow Siamese racing colours. There he is, blue body, yellow wheels, and as Ludovic Lindsay swings that car through Madgwick, you see the understeer. The two Cooper Bristols are starting to grapple for second place, and Roddy McPherson, who got within half a second of Patrick Lindsay briefly, has now slipped back a bit because he's got his mirrors full of Gregor Fiskin, the Scot, in the ex-Horace Gould Cooper Bristol, and he is getting closer and closer. And ERA leads Cooper Bristol's second and third.
Yeah, this really is, with the greatest of respect, ancient versus fairly modern, because as you point out, Simon, that ERA is pre-war, it's in immaculate condition. The Cooper Bristols, of course, are post-war, the kind of car that the great Mike Hawthorne made his reputation in. I was at Boreham when Mike Hawthorne in a Cooper Bristol beat Luigi Villaresi, the Italian, and that was an incredible victory. And if Lindsay can stay ahead the way he's doing now, he's going to be doing extremely well. It's a cart sprung, very stiff, and compared with the Cooper Bristol's unwieldy ERA, but it looks to me as though we're going to have a 1-2-3 that is covered by 2 or 3 seconds, especially as they're coming up to the tail enders.
In the pits now we have the little Alta, of Martin Redmond. There's Lindsay in the lead, close to the wheel, puts on the opposite lock as he goes through Lavant, and you can see the rubber smoke coming off the inside rear wheel of that ERA as he feeds on the power. And they're absolutely covered by a handkerchief now. These are the three leaders, a magnificent first race at Goodwood for 32 years, and Ludovic Lindsay has another back marker to lap,
and he's got the advantage here because he's going through past the tail ender, but McPherson and Fiskin do exactly the same thing. The pressure in this last lap coming up soon as they go through the chicane to start lap 15, their last lap, is very much on Ludovic Lindsay.
And seeing those cars go through the chicane absolutely on the limit, the years roll away. They're lapping the little Pierce MG there of Ray Davis, nephew of Cliff Davis, a great Goodwood racer. And as Ray Davis keeps over to the left and out of the way, so the leading trio go through. This is their final lap. And Ludovic Lindsay manages to ease away just a little bit. I think he is re-establishing this lead, or is he? No, Ronnie McPherson coming up there to attack. And as they go into Lavant, they've got St Mary's, in fact, coming up. That's Fordwater. They come up now to St Mary's, the one left-hander on the circuit. Ludovic Lindsay turns into it. Cooper Bristol's, both of them, follow. They come over the slight brow, and now a long slide through the double right-hander of Lavant. And Ronnie McPherson under pressure now from Gregor Fiskin. Gregor Fiskin is right there. ERA, Cooper Bristol. Cooper Bristol, there's absolutely nothing in it as they come onto the Lavant straight for the 15th and last time. Ludovic Lindsay working away at that high wheel in the high cockpit of the ERA. Ronnie McPherson looks one side, then the other. As they come down to Woodcote Corner, Ludovic Lindsay keeps the door shut. Lindsay keeping well over to the right of the road, takes a tight line. The ERA slides wide as he comes out. They've just got the chicane now. They come into the chicane. ERA, Cooper Bristol. The checkered flag is waiting. Ronnie McPherson is going to have to hold on to that second place, and Ludovic Lindsay wins. Ronnie McPherson is second. Gregor Fiskin is third, and they're covered, the three of them, by 9/10 of a second.
At Goodwood and set to the scene.
Absolute wonderful stuff there. Now the crowd quietly getting ready for our first race of the afternoon, the Glover Trophy. It's Formula One, but it's from 1961-65. Don't you dare miss those. Hello again from Goodwood. Without further ado, let's go and see what's happening on the track. It's the Glover Trophy. Our commentators Murray Walker and first Simon Taylor.
A magnificent field of 27 Formula One cars from 1961 to 1965 are on their final parade lap before they come round for a 21-lap race. The Glover Trophy, it was always the Glover Trophy on Easter Monday, the main Formula One race of the day, and Formula One cars ran here up to 1965. They didn't run here at all in the last year of Goodwood, 1966. So what you're seeing this afternoon are the latest types of Formula One cars that ever raced at Goodwood, and you're going to see a lot of bright green cars with yellow stripes down them. There is one glimpsed there, because the Works Lotuses were always dark green with a broad yellow stripe, and in the middle of the front row will be Jeff Farmer driving the magic Lotus 25, the first monocoque Grand Prix car. There it is, the yellow helmet of Jeff Farmer, and that is the sort of car that Jim Clark himself ran this car, in fact, to win at Silverstone. He lost the World Championship when it broke in the South African Grand Prix at Kyalami, and that BRM in the picture now, driven today by Rick Hall, driven when it was new by Graham Hill. He won the 1964 Monaco Grand Prix in that car, and Jackie Stewart, who's here today, who's done the parade in that car, also ran the car with success in the 1966 and 1967 Tasman Series. But on pole position is a Lotus that looks like a Lola. The Lotus BRM of Paul Alexander. There it is, car 22. It's got Lola bodywork because it ran not as a Works Lotus, but it ran for the Parnell team, run by Tim Parnell, another man who's here today, the son of Reg Parnell. Jeff Farmer in the middle of the front row. Car 27 there is the Malcolm Ricketts Lotus, one of the 4-cylinder cars, and you see it has the name of Jim Clark on because Jim Clark drove this car in Australia and New Zealand in the Tasman series. Lotus BRM in Parnell colours, Lotus 25 in the middle of the front row for Jeff Farmer. On the outside of the front row is the American Duncan Dayton in the apple green Brabham that used to be raced by...
and away they go. It's a 21-lap race. And as you can see, the conditions are absolutely perfect as they turn into Madgwick, the first right-hander on this track. There's only one left-hander on it. It's tremendously fast, it's tremendously spectacular.
And a stunning start from Duncan Dayton. It was Bill Anderson's name I was trying to remember who raced that car when it was new. Duncan Dayton, the American collector, has gone straight into the lead from the outside of the front row. And as the haymaking goes on, the cars go round the back of the circuit, through Fordwater, up now to St Mary's, the corner where Stirling Moss had that dreadful accident and a collision there. A couple of cars have spun, and 3-4 cars have spun. Going back onto the circuit is Danny Sullivan, the IndyCar driver, car 14, the Lola Climax, managed to regain the track, but sadly Jeff Farmer has spun.
That's Rick Hall.
So has Rick Hall,
car there.
Indeed, in the BRM, and we're seeing it again. And what happened was that somebody locked up his wheels, left his braking too late, hit Jeff Farmer from behind, and several cars went off. Happily, it seems that none of these almost priceless cars have been severely damaged, but several of them are out of the race, and that has left Duncan Dayton with a comfortable lead in the Brabham BT11, the ex-Bob Anderson car, with Paul Alexander on his tail now, the blue car with the red mouth, which, as I say, looks like a Lola. It's actually a Lotus BRM, and Paul Alexander, the fastest man in practice, closing fast.
Pity that accident, because it's taken at least 4 cars out. As Simon says, a very expensive accident, but as you can see, it spread the field out. Dayton and Alexander now some 7 seconds ahead of Danny Sullivan, the American, the man who's won the Indianapolis 500 race over here too, and he's an ex-Formula 1 driver for Tyrrell, and he's getting really right back in the groove.
In fact, he's never driven a historic car of this sort, but as we've seen over and over again, once a racing driver, always a racing driver, whatever the equipment. Now, the car with the damaged nose section is Rob's Lamplow's Lotus 33 V8, another ex-Jimmy Clark car, car 28. He was damaged in that accident at the start. I don't know if it was him who left his braking too late and hit Jeff Farmer. The front of his car is certainly damaged, but he is pressing on regardless. There he is. That's Rob's Lamplow, who used to race in Formula 2 in the days when these cars were current. Car 7, incidentally, very similar to the car that Stirling Moss had his bad accident in colour. It's actually Alan McGregor's BRP BRM, wearing the pale green colours of the BRP cars, which were designed and built by Tony Robinson. But now there's Rob's Lamplow.
And he's not letting it interfere with him at all. He's bashed the front of the car in. You can see it's going to interfere with the airflow to the radiator a bit. But on he goes, those yellow... Oh, and out of the race, it looks to me, goes Michel Wanty in the Lotus 24 Climax. The V8 Climax engine behind him. What a pity, because he's come a long way to take part in this race.
He has, and that's an Exodus Ireland car, which explains why he's wearing a white helmet with the big checks round, which is exactly how the late Innes Ireland used to drive that car. Well, Rob's Lamplow is storming on after that delay. He's now back up to 7th place, and Paul Alexander has the lead. Paul Alexander has taken his Lotus BRM ahead. Duncan Dayton has dropped to 3rd. That's the Rick Hall BRM, sadly out of the race as Rick Hall walks away, the car that he rebuilt for the Donington collection. But Paul Alexander, meanwhile, has gone ahead, and Danny Sullivan did get up into 2nd place, but he's just lost that 2nd place again.
And this race certainly proves that it is a race and not a demonstration. I know a lot of people came here thinking historic cars. They're going to be watching over them very carefully indeed, anxious to preserve their investment. They're not going to push too hard. We've seen the live for that all the way through. Practice and racing yesterday, racing again today. There is the famous chicane in the background as Alexander, number 22, crosses the line. Oh, he's still in first position, and sorry, Dayton is still in first position, and there he is, and it's a grand race.
Indeed, the confusion from the timekeepers now sorted out. Duncan Dayton has indeed, as Murray says, held that lead all the way through in the apple green Brabham in the colours of the privateer Bob Anderson, who ran this car for so long as a privateer in Formula One, and it may be said with considerable success on a fraction of the budget used by the works teams.
Let's have a bit of provocation, Simon. Formula One these days, tremendously exciting, tremendously spectacular, tremendously colourful, but this is great stuff, isn't it? Beautiful motor cars, lots of different colours, different engines, different variety of specifications, and it looks marvellous.
Well, it certainly does to me. I remember watching these cars when they were new, and I get just the same excitement today watching them. Duncan Dayton, who has a magnificent collection of a dozen or more 1960s racing cars at home in America. It's this Brabham BT11 with a BRM V8 engine that he has decided to bring here to Goodwood, and he's really using it, sliding the car through Woodcote, coming down now to the chicane, and he's pulling away from the second man, which is still Paul Alexander. Paul Alexander still in second place as the Innis Ireland helmeted car comes in. That's Michel Wanty, who has managed to keep his car going sufficiently to bring it back to the pits. And another slide at Madrid from Duncan Dayton. He is absolutely motoring.
Duncan is coming through to complete his fifth lap now, just about 3 seconds ahead of Alexander now, as you see. Then there's another 6 seconds before Danny Sullivan comes through. Paul is in fourth position. That is number 19 in the Lotus 24 Climax with a V8 engine. Bailey, 19, nearly 20 seconds behind the leader. Things are getting a bit spread out. Now, this is going to be a race where reliability counts. It's very, very hot here at Goodwood. You can see the heat haze that they're driving through. That's not water on the track, that's an optical illusion, but it's no illusion as he goes through on the inside there.
Yes, that's McGregor coming up, Alan McGregor in the little BRP, but the man I want to watch is Rob's Lamplow in car 28, the car with the damaged nose section. He's in 7th place, but his lap times are very much quicker than the men in front of him. He's now on the tail of Malcolm Ricketts in the larger but more primitive 4-cylinder engine, 2.5-litre Tasman car. That car, there it is, there's Rob's Lamplow, and I think he must have got past Ricketts because he's all on his own now. Ricketts has indeed been passed by Lamplow, which puts him up into 6th place, and he is tramping on despite the damage to the front of this car. An ex-Jim Clark, ex-Jackie Stewart 1964-65 car. It was in this car that Jim Clark had a much photographed and rather notorious accident in the Race of Champions at Brands Hatch.
Well, not so very far behind them. Number 19, Rob Hall, he's in 4th position, and he's the quickest man on the track, or at least he was on lap 4, because he went round in 1 minute 29.4, and at the present moment he's only just about 3 seconds behind Danny Sullivan, who is in 3rd position. So it's still Dayton, Alexander, Sullivan, Hall, Bailey and Lamplow in the top 6 places, lap 6 out of 21.
Americans then in 1st and 3rd places. Duncan Dayton not threatened at all by Paul Alexander, who was the man on pole position. He was the fastest qualifier, but today Paul Alexander doesn't seem to be able to get near the similarly powered V8 BRM powered Brabham of Duncan Dayton. Brabham beating Lotus, both of them with BRM engines. And in 3rd place, Danny Sullivan is closing on Paul Alexander. Danny Sullivan having a guest drive in a car, it may be said, that belongs to Duncan Dayton.
Simon, we talk about tyres a lot in Formula One these days. Very different as we look at them here, aren't they? Different width, different tread construction.
Well, very much so, and of course what it means with these narrow tyres is that if it does happen to rain, it isn't instantly a case of stopping for fresh rubber. You just pressed on with these skinny tyres, giving you rather more grip on a wet track than today's wide slick tyres obviously would. But Paul Alexander now seems to be closing up a little bit.
Well, there's Danny Sullivan, the second of those two cars. Now here are the second and third. 22 Alexander, 14 Danny Sullivan, but well behind them, 3 seconds behind them is Hull. But Danny Sullivan is really putting the bung out now. The American is getting the feel of the car, the tyres, the track, and he's closing up on number 22, Alexander, in second place.
Well, I hope that Tim Parnell, who took part in the wonderful 50-car Dream Grid display earlier on this morning, is watching, because his cars, the dark blue with the red nose cone, his cars are battling for second place, both identically coloured, because both these cars were run by the Parnell racing team back in the early 60s. And Paul Alexander in the Lotus BRM still just holding off Danny Sullivan in the Lola.
So 3 different makes of car in the top 3. That's great. Brabham and Lotus and Lola, and the Lola's going through. Danny Sullivan, number 14, shows his nose and dives through. Is he going? But he needs to keep the position on the inside of the track. He fails to do so. They're coming up behind number 11, Paul Osborne in the Emerson. There's a historic car for you. And number 22, Alexander, just keeps his second place. But Danny Sullivan now knows where to look through on the inside and try and make up a place.
Yes, they lap that little Emerson wearing the yellow colours of Belgium, because briefly there was a Belgian Formula One team using these curious, rather flat, wide Emerson cars, lapping now the unique Alfa Romeo-powered LDS of Brian Tyler. And as they go on through, it's still Dayton well ahead, but the car that Dayton owns, driven by Danny Sullivan in third place, is challenging once more Paul Alexander, and he's trying to go round the outside. There's a back marker once more as they go from St Mary's and away to Lavant, and still Danny Sullivan, a vastly experienced, hugely competent international racing driver, but Paul Alexander knows his car. Paul has been very successful in this class of historic Formula One racing, and he's got a trick or two up his sleeve, and he's still trying to hold off Danny Sullivan in the Lola number 14.
And it's still Duncan Dayton, the American, in the lead in the ex-Bob Anderson car, the Bob Anderson Brabham BT11 Climax. That's the ex-racing motorcyclist who took to 4 wheels like a duck to water, did extremely well on a virtually non-existent budget, trailering his car around behind a Ford 1500 weight truck, I remember very distinctly. Sadly, he was killed, and he could have been one of the greats, I think.
Well, indeed, now one of the slower Lotuses has split Paul Alexander, who seems to have found a little bit more speed from somewhere. And interestingly, this battle for second place between Danny Sullivan and Paul Alexander has brought them closer to the leader. And we've lost Duncan Dayton. I don't see Duncan Dayton. He has gone missing somewhere. He's in the pits. There is Duncan Dayton's car in the pits. What a shame. The ex-Bob Anderson Brabham BT11 is in the pits. And that means that Duncan Dayton can now watch and see his own car being driven by Danny Sullivan, fighting now not for second place, but fighting for the lead. This is the lead battle. Paul Alexander leads Danny Sullivan on their 9th of 21 laps.
Rotten luck for Duncan Dayton. He'd come a long way, smoking gun, as it were, because there was steam coming out of the engine. You can see it for yourselves there. Well, at least he can say that he led at the Revival meeting at Goodwood, and that'll be a very proud boast.
Well, now, Danny Sullivan is a very, very experienced and canny driver indeed. As Murray reminded you, an Indianapolis star, a star of long-distance sports car racing. He knows that this is only the 9th of 21 laps, and as Paul Alexander comes through the chicane, there's Danny Sullivan pursuing him. We've still got Rob Hall's Lotus in third place, Alan Bailey is fourth, Rob Lamplow has been promoted to 5th by the retirement of Duncan Dayton, and Malcolm Ricketts is in 6th place, but the battle for the lead goes on.
And a bit of useless information for you, Danny Sullivan, very much a dollar millionaire, because When he won at Indianapolis, he scooped up several $1 million as a result of the victory and all the sponsorship that he's got. And he's certainly spending his money the right way now, following his love, which is motor racing. 1.3 seconds behind race leader Alexander, number 22 that you look at there. Lotus BRM leads then, and in second place, the Lola Climax of, there he is, Danny Sullivan. And 22 seconds behind them now. Look for number 19, Rob Hall. That's another Lotus, but it's these two are making the running, and very much so.
What's interesting is that Danny Sullivan drops right back, has a little think about it, and then is able quite effortlessly to close right up on Paul Alexander. Paul Alexander pulled out 1.3 seconds lead at the end of the last lap, but now on the 10th of 21 laps as they come now through Woodcote Corner and in the short dart down to the chicane, Danny Sullivan closes right up under braking. A little brief locked wheel there from Paul Alexander, and as they come past our box in a great blast of V8 sound, two little jewel-like 1.5 litre V8 engines, Paul Alexander has just 7/10 of a lead.
Another comparative note. I mean, these tyres have got an all-weather tread on. They could use these tyres in the dry, they could use them in the wet, and I don't see any diminution in the excitement of the racing here. In fact, if anything, just the reverse. This is marvellous motor racing. Look at it, all the way down the field.
It absolutely is. There are battles all the way down, and even though the weather may be absolutely superb, it's hot, it's dry, as we watch there Rob's Lamplaus working his way through, the track is actually very, very oily because it's been three very busy days this weekend, and the track is extremely slippery as we watch the red LDS Alfa Romeo briefly there, built by Doug Sararia in South Africa. Danny Sullivan posts fastest lap, 1:29.2.
Simon, you put your finger on it. Rob's Lamplaus, who was down to 10th, if you remember, with a crumpled nose on his car, has carved his way through to 4th position. He's made up 6 places. Although he is slower than the first two, he's going a lot quicker than Bailey's Lotus BRM. That's number 21 when you see it. And he's challenging for third position. And there's a spinner, number 5 there, who's stuck in the chicane.
That's Robert Brooks. Robert Brooks in the other ex-Graham Hill BRM. In this race, Robert Brooks spun. There was a back marker there to be lapped, which was Doug Mockett's Cooper, and he had to take to the grass as well. Fortunately, it has had no effect at all on this wonderful battle for the lead, and still Paul Alexander leads. Still Danny Sullivan is just planning his move. We're now on the 12th of 21 laps, and I think that Danny Sullivan is quite content to sit on Paul Alexander's tail.
I'm sure you're right, because he's just gone fastest. He's just made the fastest lap of the race in closing up, 1:29.
And he goes through! He goes through! And he goes off!
And off! Well, Sullivan regains the track, but he was just a bit too precipitate there as he went into the left-right at St Mary's, and he's got it all to do again. Alexander must be laughing up his sleeve. Here it is.
Yeah, we're going to see it again as they come into the left-hand part of St Mary's. Danny Sullivan goes through on the inside, but the corner is too tight for him. He runs wide to the right, gets onto the grass. Paul Alexander retakes the lead. Fortunately, Danny Sullivan is able to rejoin without any further damage. Now, Murray, we're going to see what Danny Sullivan is made of, because he can't bide his time now. He's got to go for it. He's on lap 12 of 21. He's got to get the trotter down.
Yeah, and 1:29.2 is his own target, his own fastest lap so far. Now, the leader, as you can see, 22 Alexander, had a momentary problem there. He's cutting his way through the field. He's lapping people, and if he's delayed, it'll give Danny Sullivan the opportunity to close up.
The man they've just lapped, the white crash helmet with the old Harrovian colours going vertically straight across it, lapped now by Paul Alexander, about to be lapped by Danny Sullivan, is the helmet of Richard Atwood, who finished second at the Monaco Grand Prix when he was a Works BRM driver. He's still driving, and he's just been lapped by the leaders.
Sorry to interrupt you, Simon, but your man, Rob Lamplough, is now in third position. He's passed Bailey. He's 37 seconds behind the leaders, and he's now lapping marginally quicker than the second place Danny Sullivan. If you're looking for numbers, 22 Alexander leads, 14 Sullivan is second, 28 Robs Lamplough is third, and down to fourth position. There is Robs Lamplough. Now he's the fastest man on the track at this moment.
He also has the most recent car. The car looks very similar to the Lotus 25 that we saw Jeff Farmer drive so briefly, but this is the slightly later monocoque Lotus, the Lotus 33, which Jim Clark was driving in 1965 when he was on the quest of another World Championship title.
And
meanwhile, we wait to see what has happened to Danny Sullivan. How long has it taken him to catch up with Paul Alexander? The answer is not very long. They cross the start-finish line now to begin their 14th lap. And the gap is 1.2 seconds.
Exactly. Sullivan is starting to close the gap. Now, these cars, 1.5 litres, most of them, in comparison with today's 3-litre Formula One cars. The racing is no less exciting. Top speed here, do you think?
About 145, 150 miles an hour down the Lavant Straight. And, of course, the interesting thing, Murray, they're much, much slower around the corners, because in the 1960s, nobody had ever heard of downforce. These cars have no wings. They don't have the great big wide tyres, which means that in a straight line, they're very quick. And Danny Sullivan is going for it. Danny Sullivan tucked right up behind Paul Alexander there. It didn't take him very long to recover from that mistake. He's not going to make that mistake again at St Mary's, I would think.
It's our old friend, though, Simon. Catching is one thing, getting past is quite another.
Well, Danny Sullivan knows about that. And once more, having got very close to Paul Alexander, he hangs back a little bit and starts to plot his overtaking manoeuvre. That overtaking manoeuvre at St Mary's, which incidentally didn't come off, was a very brave and clever move, and nobody certainly in my sight, has done that at all here at Goodwood this weekend. Now Danny Sullivan's got to decide, that didn't come off, where am I going to do it next time?
Well, 20 cars started this race, 18 of them are still running, and that's a credit to the preparation of the mechanics and the owners, because these are old Formula One motor cars. They've stood the test of time magnificently. They're standing the heat and the pressure here at Goodwood extremely well. And race leader, number 22 there, Paul Alexander, at the moment is withstanding the pressure of Danny Sullivan. In fact, he's pulled away a bit. It's a gap of about just over 1 second now. Lap 15, 21 lap, and it continues to be great stuff.
They were just lapping, incidentally,
there's
one of
Lamplough.
the... Yeah, there's Lamplough. Now, Lamplough in third place is lapping almost identically the same speed as Paul Alexander, but the gap between them after Lamplough's earlier delay is over half a minute. So Robs Lamplough has got as far as I think he can in this race, provided that Paul Alexander and Danny Sullivan don't hit any trouble. We're on the 15th of 21 laps, and still Tim Parnell must be watching the old Parnell Racing colours dominating the first Glover Trophy for Formula One cars to take place for, 33 years here around this beautiful sunny Sussex circuit. They're coming up now to lap Brian Tyler in the LDS Alfa Romeo.
And down the track behind Alexander, Sullivan, Lamplough, Bailey and Farmer, there's a terrific battle going on between Smith and Ricketts, numbers 16 and 17, and hello, number 27 there. Coming in is Ricketts, just the man I was talking about. He was having a terrific battle for 6th position, but there's been a problem with the machinery, obviously. Up comes his hand, and he's coming into the pit lane as the leaders dive through on the inside now. This is lap 16. They've been at it virtually all the way, and it looks as though they're going to take it right down to the wire.
Well, once more, it's St Mary's again. Now, that was where Danny Sullivan tried it last time, and it didn't come off. This time he tries again, and and he's alongside, and he's nosed ahead. So the manoeuvre, the very same manoeuvre, which didn't come off first time, has worked the second time, and as they go through the double right-hander at Lavant and on to the long Lavant straight, where these cars do get up to about 145, 150 miles an hour, and Paul Alexander's fighting back as they go down through that slight left-hand kink on Lavant straight, and Paul Alexander attacked briefly, but Danny Sullivan holds his lead. 14 Sullivan, 22 Alexander.
And Lola leads, and Lotus is in second place. Lola seldom did all that well in Formula One in the great days. It was Colin Chapman's Lotuses in this era that dominated things with the BRM. But Lola is fighting back, not hard enough. Well, it is hard enough at the present moment, because Sullivan leads, and now that he's got his nose ahead and he knows exactly what the form is, I reckon he's going to stay there.
And however good your knowledge of Formula One cars from the early 60s, you can be excused if you think that that Lotus in second place, car number 22, looks nothing like a Lotus. The reason is that when the car was new, for some reason lost in the mists of time, the Parnell team put a Lola body on it. So both the leading cars have Lola bodywork, but underneath the chassis of the second place car is a Lotus. There's Rob's Lamplough, still with his damage to the nose of that beautiful Lotus 33. What a shame, but he's driving on. Rob's Lamplough today drives with his mouth open. Exactly how he used to when I used to watch him in the early 1960s. When the going really gets tough, Robs opens his mouth and puts his foot down.
The ultimate fly cutter, and now he's tight up behind. He's going to go through and lap the car ahead of him, which moves over. And I must say, Simon, that I'm very impressed with the courtesy and the driving manners of everybody in these historic races here at Goodwood. They're playing the game. When they see someone coming up in their mirrors, they move over. 27 there is Malcolm Rickett's car, the 2.5-litre Lotus 32.
It's interesting that in the driver's briefing that took place after a delightful cricket match, where I may say, because Murray's too modest to tell you, that Murray Walker was the umpire in a light-hearted cricket match which, surprise, surprise, ended not in a draw, but in a dead heat. Same number of runs each side. And after that, there was a driver's briefing, and Lord March himself had a quiet word with all these drivers and said, we've worked very hard to make this event work. Go out there, drive hard, have some fun, but do remember, we want to end the weekend all in one piece. Well, Rob's Lamplough's Lotus, not quite in one piece. It's going to need some expensive work on that nose cone, but he crosses the start-finish line to begin his 18th lap, does Rob's Lamplough. 40 seconds now behind the leaders, and Danny Sullivan is only marginally leading Paul Alexander. Paul Alexander hasn't given up, and as they come through the back markers, that's when Paul Alexander may perhaps have his opportunity.
Alan McGregor's BRM, the light green car, is going to be lapped first of all by Danny Sullivan, who gets his opportunity. Alexander must have been hoping that Sullivan would be balked, but he most certainly was not. What I was saying about the driving manners here. So Lotus second and third, Lola in the lead. In fourth place, it's number 21, Bailey's Lotus. So the Lola is preventing a Lotus 1, 2, 3 at the moment. Lap 18, only 3 to go at the end of this one. How time flies when you're enjoying yourself.
And Duncan Dayton below us, standing by the now silent Brabham BT11, because he had to call it a day after leading this race magnificently from the outside of the front row. He is down there cheering on his man Danny Sullivan in his own car, and if he couldn't win the race himself, I think the next best for Duncan Dayton must be to see his own car in the lead, driven by Danny Sullivan. And Paul Alexander has now slipped back a bit in that traffic. 1.7 seconds the gap between Sullivan and Alexander on their 19th of 21
exactly
laps.
As we watch Danny Sullivan, and I'm sure it's going to give the laconic, good-looking, extremely friendly and cheerful Americans a most gigantic charge. Winning any race is good, but to come back to the Goodwood Revival, to drive a car of a type you've never driven before, with the distinction and skill that Sullivan is doing now, and to lead after having fought your way through to the front, and he's now on lap 19 out of 21, just 2 laps to go at the end, is a great achievement. So, into the chicane, right, left, a new lap starts very shortly.
It's interesting that these cars really don't look 35 years old. It's really the work of Colin Chapman. First John Cooper, who thought of putting the engine in the back, and then Colin Chapman, who developed the Lotus to such a pitch that all the other racing car manufacturers tended to copy them. And whether it's a Lola or a Lotus or a Brabham, they all look pretty similar, and they all owe a big debt to the genius of Colin Chapman.
Do you think, Simon, number 22 there, Alexander's got a problem? He's dropped right back from battling with Danny Sullivan. He's 5 seconds behind him now on the 20th lap out of 21. I'm quite sure his second place is safe, because Rob Slamplow is some 41 seconds behind him. He's lapping about 1.5 seconds faster than Alexander at the present moment, but he hasn't got enough time to make up the gap.
Well, indeed he is, and I think it must be that he's decided that he's now not going to catch Danny Sullivan. He's got plenty of time in hand ahead of Rob Slamplow. But the other man who's going remarkably well is Jeff Farmer. Remember that he was delayed by that spin at St Mary's on the very first lap. We speculate whether he was actually nudged from behind by Rob Slamplow, now running in 3rd place. And Jeff Farmer in Lotus number 25 has managed to gather it all together. He's worked his way back up the field, and he is only now 10 seconds behind Alan Bailey, and Alan Bailey is putting pressure on Rob Slamplow. We could possibly have a change for 3rd place just in the closing moments of this race. They're on their 20th, now 21st of 21 laps. Danny Sullivan starts his final lap.
And his fastest on the track. I said his previous target was 1:29.2. And just to celebrate what looks like being a great occasion for him, with Sparks trailing underneath it, we watch Ian Pugh in the Brabham BT11. That's the ex-Joe Sifford car. Danny Sullivan has celebrated what looks like being a wonderful victory by also having the fastest lap of the race, and he's on his last lap.
Yes, indeed, as they come through St Mary's for the final time. The field now somewhat strung out, but still Danny Sullivan has to pick his way through the back markers. There's Rob Slamplow, and there is Alan Bailey right on his tail. Alan Bailey attacks, goes through on the inside as they start their final lap. And it's Rob Slamplow who has to yield now. Alan Bailey, a tremendous lunge up the inside in another ex-Team Parnell Lotus 21. And we're now going to have the first 3 cars, if the result remains the same. Rob Slamplow doesn't want it to. Attacks round the outside.
Here's Sullivan, almost home.
Danny Sullivan is almost home, and if Alan Bailey holds that 3rd place, it's going to be the dark blue and red-nosed colours of the Parnell team that finished 1, 2, 3. Here comes Danny Sullivan, who comes out of the chicane for the last time. Down the start-finish straight, the checkered flag is waiting. Danny Sullivan scores a great Glover Trophy win. He's followed home by Paul Alexander, and we wait to see what is going to happen with this battle for 3rd place. There's Rob Slamplow, there is Alan Bailey. Alan Bailey is still ahead as they come down the Lavant Straight and on towards Woodcote Corner. There's just Woodcote Corner and the chicane left between the two of them, and Alan Bailey gets on the brakes, takes a rather wide entry, looks a little bit unsettled there. Rob Slamplow a little tidier, but Alan Bailey still has the advantage as they come down into the chicane for the last time. Through the chicane, they're going for the finish line. Alan Bailey and the Lotus BRM in 3rd place. Rob Slamplow demoted to 4th, and Bailey gets that 3rd place. And what about that? First, the Lola of Danny Sullivan. 2nd, the Lotus BRM of Paul Alexander. 3rd, Alan Bailey's Lotus, and all 3 of them in the colours of Parnell Racing.
And Jeff Farmer is going to take the 5th position. Only 5 people are going to have done all 21 laps of the Glover Trophy. Well, that was a more than wonderful taste of Formula One racing some years ago, from 1960 to 1965. Like I said, the cars didn't look any less spectacular, they didn't look any less beautiful. They may have gone slower in absolute terms, but racing is about how fast you go in relation to the man in front and the man behind. It can still be mighty spectacular, as it has been today.
So without a doubt, that's what you call a real race. Now then, coming up after a short break, Damon Hill against Barry Sheene on 2 wheels each. Stay tuned for that one. Here we are again. Glorious Goodwood normally applies to the horses, but this is motorsport and it truly is glorious. There's the horse track in the background. Never mind about that. Let's get the noisy monsters on screen. Now, how about this for a menu? Former motorbike courier rider I should say, against former world star on 2 wheels. We are talking Damon Hill against Barry Sheene. Dave Beckett was the guy who took a look at this one.
The Goodwood crowd has a lot to thank Barry Sheene for. The motorcycling star knew his friend from Formula One wouldn't be able to resist a head-to-head meeting.
He'll get the hang of it easy enough. Damon gave up racing after I gave up racing, so a long time after. So he sneaked down to Brands Hatch and had to go to the racing school, as people have told me. And his dad says to me, I haven't ridden a bike for 10 years, Barry, you know.
In the 80s, Damon won 32 races in one season on a Yamaha, and before that, Sheene was his hero.
Right. I thought you'd have yellow. Oh, black ones. Nice. I thought it'd be that horrible canary yellow thing. Not this time.
Damon was soon back in the biking groove, like Sheene riding a Manx Norton for the first time ever, and loving every minute.
That's a beautiful machine. I mean, it must have been really something to ride that around the Isle of Man. And to see Barry riding round in front of me on them, I was getting a real kick out of that. It was quite a laugh.
How did he do, Barry?
Oh, he done great. I was really surprised because it's one thing he doesn't know the circuit, you know, on a bike, and he hasn't ridden a bike for ages. The gear shifts on a different side and everything.
What about this allegation of Barry's that you've been practising at Brands Hatch?
Well, someone's been winding Barry up, I think, because I haven't been near a bike, and that's the first time I've ever been on a bike in a circuit since 1984. Honest.
Yes. And you've never lied to me?
I've not lied to you. I'm not lying to you now. Nothing I ever say is a lie.
And when are you going to stick him in a Formula One car?
Oh, no, thank you.
No, he's welcome to that if he wants to have a go.
It was a great way for 2 former world champions to spend a weekend off. A fun diversion for Damon. Next week he's back to serious business in the Luxembourg Grand Prix.
Well, that looked a bit of fun, didn't it? As you can see, the cars are all getting ready. Fun is really the appropriate word for this meeting. And the man sitting next to me in our purpose-built studio is a man who's always had fun throughout his motor racing career. It's Derek Bell. You've driven, Derek, just about everything, but never bikes, really, have you?
I'm very relieved, I must admit. I've had my work cut out driving 4 wheels. Getting on 2 wheels will be a major problem.
Now, you are very much our local man. This is almost your back garden. Is it good to be home?
Oh, it's wonderful, yeah. I mean, it's very, very special to me, particularly, I think, probably more than any other driver here, because I grew up down in Pagham and I used to be out on the farm and I could hear the cars going around, and joined the Bognor Motor Club so I could get a bit closer and wave the old yellow flag and on Madgewick Corner here or the chicane, and that's how I got close to racing and how it all started, really.
And from this, you've been all over the world piloting these wonderful cars. Very nostalgic weekend, this, isn't it?
It is fantastic. For me, it's a different sort of nostalgia, because none of these cars I raced, you know. Fortunately, I'm actually a little bit younger than these. So, believe it or not. So, for me, the thing is, I was sitting on the grid down here just yesterday in the little Formula One Cooper, and I thought, you know, seeing all these beautiful Ferraris and Maseratis all coming around, and I thought, this is unbelievable, because, you know, I used to watch my heroes driving these cars, leaning over the fence, and there I am now driving in those very cars.
You're too modest to say it. In your race, you took a valued second place. I was surprised at how competitive it all is, because these cars are valuable.
Yes, it is actually crazy, but wonderful. Peter Gethin, a very good old compatriot of mine in the early days, he leant in the cockpit on the grid and he just looked at me and he said, just take it easy. I said, Peter, when have we ever taken it easy? I mean, when the flag drops, that is it.
That's it. All hell lets loose.
Yeah.
All right, well, nice to hear from you for now. Stay with us, please. We'll be talking more with Derek as we go through the programme. This is what's happening out on the track. Live racing in a moment. Right now, though, time for a short break. But don't go away.
They can now race in confidence thanks to the introduction of privet crash barriers.
The one single-seaters from the 1960s, but believe me, you ain't seen nothing yet. You're now going to see World Championship sports cars from previous years. And amongst them, and this is going to be the tables reversed, is my friend and your friend, Martin Brundle. He's in this magnificent yellow D-type Jaguar. Martin, I know you had a bit of trouble getting in today.
Yeah, we got stuck in the fog in the helicopter, unfortunately, but it's 1 minute to go, Murray.
Now, I know you've been out in practice, and I had two real veterans come up to me and say, Martin Brundle's been driving a D-type here like I've never seen one driven before, and they meant well. What do you think of it?
I thought I was completely out of control for the entire few laps that I did, but it was an awful lot of fun, and I'm really... Can you believe this? I'm starting next to Stirling Moss. You got to go, Murray. You got to go, my friend.
Well, there you go. It's time to clear the grid. It's time for me to go, and it's time for you to go back to Simon Taylor.
Thank you, Murray. How wonderful to see Murray and Martin on the grid in a rather different environment from how we normally see them on Sunday afternoons. This is the Lavant Cup World Championship sports cars from 1957 to 1960. 21 laps. You're looking at Robin Lodge's delectable little Maserati 200S. And now the green flag sends these wonderful, nay, priceless cars off on their final parade lap. They'll then come round and do a conventional grid start, and look at that traffic jam. There isn't enough mathematics in the world to calculate what they're all worth, and it's not only the cars themselves, it's the history of each one. That's another little Maserati, number 20, driven by William Hay. The D-type Jaguars, most of them have raced at Le Mans. The Aston Martin DBR1 there, number 7, driven by Stirling Moss, is probably the most successful Aston Martin racing car ever, because it won the TT twice here at Goodwood, and it also won Le Mans in 1959. Stirling Moss was at the wheel when it won the Tourist Trophy in 58 and 59. In 1959, it also won the Le Mans 24-hour race driven by Roy Salvadori and Carroll Shelby. Roy Salvadori also is here. And for almost every other car in this race of this fantastic 29-car field, there is a special story. D-type Jaguars there going by, that Aston Martin flashing by, driven by Simon Draper. That car itself has a great works history, and all the way down the field there is history, there is value, there is beautiful design from Ferraris, Maseratis, Jaguars, Aston Martins. And on pole position it is a Ferrari. In the middle of the front row it's an Aston Martin. On the outside of the front row it's a Maserati. So we've got a real mix of marks at the front, and in the middle of the front row, whom you'll see when we form the grid up here below my box, Brian Redman, the great sports car driver who was racing just at the very beginning of his career when Goodwood was first begun. He told me that he drove his Morris Minor all the way from the North Country, Lancashire, where he lived, all the way down to Goodwood, did a 5-lap handicap and drove all the way home again. He didn't know that he was going to become a hugely successful Formula One and particularly long-distance sports car driver. He lives now in the United States. He's in car number 3 on the right of your picture now. He's come over from America because he wouldn't miss this Goodwood Revival for anything. There is Brian Redman, and the car, the Aston Martin DBR2, the 4-litre engined car, and Stirling Moss won here with that car and set a new sports car lap record. There is Stirling himself in number 7, and on pole position, the red Ferrari number 5, that is the very rapid and experienced historic racing car driver Peter Hardman. There's Stirling Moss in the Aston Martin DBR1, the DBR2, the bigger engined one, Brian Redman in the middle of the front row. On the outside of the front row, Rob Walton's blue and white Maserati birdcage. That's Peter Hardman on pole. And as we wait, there's Martin Brundle in the yellow D-type. Yellow because it used to belong to one of the Belgian racing teams. The flag falls, they go away, and a very good start from Peter Hardman from pole position. The whole field go away in a great wall of sound down to Madgwick. And it's Peter Hardman who's taken the lead already. Hardman leads in the Ferrari. Rob Walton is second in the Maserati birdcage. And Brian Redman is pushed a little bit wide by Tony Smith, who's coming through in the other birdcage. Brian Redmond pushed down to 4th place. Peter Hardman first. The two Maseratis 2nd and 3rd. Hardman is in 4th place, and one of the D-type Jaguars coming through well. Watch for the yellow D-type with the big tail fin.
There it is, there it is.
And that's Martin Brundle.
Yeah, I know I'm biased, Simon, but watch Martin Brundle, because he was really, and I use the word advisedly, awesome in qualifying and practice. As you heard him say, he couldn't get in the helicopter this morning for the first race, and he's really, really wanting to do well in this one. He loves the car, loves the circuit, and he's in very good form.
Well, he certainly is, and you must watch the steering wheels on this car, because you can see that, unlike in modern racing cars, the drivers move the front wheels from lock to lock to control the weaving tyre, the weaving car, the spinning wheels. A lot of horsepower going through rather little skinny tyres, and Willie Green in the red Testarossa Ferrari is having his own battle with Martin Brundle, and Martin Brundle just been overtaken.
Yeah, a couple of tough men there. Willie Green, a gigantically experienced, historic driver, drives Ferraris, drives Maseratis, ex-Formula 1 cars and sports cars with enormous aplomb. But Hardman is in the lead. Smith just 1 second behind him, as here they come, 9 and Martin getting it sideways. Wow, 9 and 16. 9 is Willie Green, 16 is Martin. And Willie can see exactly what the score is, but they're driving very, very politely. They're giving each other room.
Well, it didn't look that polite when Martin almost lost the car under braking. He hits the brakes, trying to go inside Willie Green. The car goes completely sideways, one way then the other, and it's only because Martin Brundle is a former world sports car champion, a former Formula 1 driver, that he was able to gather that together. In the red Ferrari just ahead of him is Willie Green. In the Jaguar just behind him, the green Jaguar, in fact he's just gone by, is another very experienced sports car driver, Wyn Percy, who, like Martin Brundle, used to drive the Silk Cut Le Mans Jaguars not so very long ago.
Brundle's just gone past Valentine Lindsay. He's up along, he's just up alongside him now and trying to go through on the inside. And as you can see, Martin Brundle in the yellow D-type has got ahead of Willie Green's Ferrari.
And he's passing Wyn Percy once again. Wyn Percy and Valentine Lindsay's D-type has to let Martin Brundle go, because Brundle has already found the limit of braking on those cars. Completely sideways, full opposite lock through Woodcote Corner goes Martin Brundle. Wyn Percy is going to fight back, and Willie Green is just ahead of them. They've got the little Porsche in front. That's
Burkhard von Schenk's car, that is, and Martin should make short shrift with that, because he's got a lot more power. Closing up behind him, you see Wyn Percy. He's a veteran, but he seems to go faster every year. Quickest lap of the race, just a whisker under 90 miles an hour average in these glorious conditions at Goodwood. Peter Hardman.
And at the front, we've got the birdcage Maserati pushing Peter Hardman very hard as Wyn Percy goes past Burkhard von Schenk's Porsche. There goes Martin Brundle, but we've got a real battle on for the lead at the front. In fact, there is the that's one of the other bird cages. There is Peter Hardman now in car number 5, and number 27 bird cage is pretty close behind. Not actually, it may be said, quite as close as he was to Peter Hardman as they passed us to start this lap. But Tony Smith has got his birdcage up into second place. And look, they're being challenged by one of the...
Brian Redmond's car is number 3. But there's a battle now going on for third position between Walton's car, number 28, Brian Redmond's car, number 3, and right up behind him you can see Frank Sittner,
yes,
the ex-BMW dealer who's just made a great deal of money from selling his business and is spending it on sports car and other kinds of racing. Well done, Frank.
Well, the car, in fact, I think belongs to Anthony Bamford and is the car that Frank Sittner has raced with such success. He knows it very, very well indeed. Brian Redmond ahead of him in the big 4-litre DBR2 Aston Martin. What a shame that they have to put that big rollover bar on it, but it's very sensible for reasons of safety. And Frank Sittner can see the Brian Redmond Aston Martin, number 3, ahead of him. It's a very quick car in a straight line. And now look at Martin Brundle up with Willie Green. Martin Brundle has closed right up again with Willie Green. He's on his tail. He's having a little look at the inside. It's not. It is Willie Green.
This is the battle for 8th and 9th, and ahead of them is Stirling Moss. So it's number 7, Stirling Moss in the Aston Martin, then Martin Brundle in the yellow Jaguar, then Willie Green in the scarlet Ferrari, the good old real Ferrari colour. 3 great names, but it's still Peter Hardman up front now. These are the cars that have dominated at Le Mans. The D-Type Jaguar, like the one that Martin Brundle is driving, won at Le Mans. Ahead of him, the 1959 Aston Martin, won at Le Mans. And Martin is now in 7th, 8th, 9th position.
And Willie Green fights back. Willie Green gets through on the inside at Lavant, and these two are absolutely on the limit. Their car's really being used. They're catching up Stirling Moss, who's in front of them. Martin Brundle and Willie Green having this magnificent battle for, at the moment, 8th place, and they're getting closer to Stirling Moss, who is just ahead of them.
The man who's in danger is Brian Redman, who is in 3rd position. That's car number 3, the Aston Martin. As there's the great Stirling Moss, Martin Brundle, Willie Green. Behind them, number 12 is
Wyn Percy.
Wyn Percy, absolutely.
Yes, and 4 great sports cars, Aston Martin, Jaguar, Ferrari and Jaguar. Stirling Moss, who held the sports car lap record here at Goodwood in that car, and it's wonderful to see the car being used as it always was, with the same man in the cockpit, Stirling Moss.
Now, but behind these, sorry to interrupt you, Simon, but Brian Redman is being caught by Frank Sidner. Brian Redman in the Aston Martin, and Frank Sidner, who is driving the Jaguar D-Type. That's cars 3 and 19, as Martin Brundle closes up on Stirling Moss and stays ahead of Willie Green's Ferrari. So Hardman out on his own, well, if you call 1 second out on his own. Smith second, then this battle for 3rd position between car 3. Brian Redman, there he is. Now look back and you'll see Frank Sidner.
Yes, there is Sidner locking up an inside front wheel as he gets on the brakes. Behind Sidner, there's Rob Walker's birdcage Maserati. A much lighter, much more modern car is the Maserati. Comes from the early 60s rather than from the late 50s. And there's the Maserati running in the blue and white colours of the American Cameradi team. Stirling Moss drove for them as well. But Brian Redman in this big, powerful but quite heavy Aston Martin. There's Frank Sidner, who knows that D-Type Jaguar so well, and look at him getting the opposite
getting it off.
Absolutely sliding their way through. 28 is Rob Walton. So a wonderful battle for the lead at the moment between Hardman and Smith.
And Willie Green now has been caught and passed by Wyn Percy. Well, I'm surprised at that. Willie Green, tremendously experienced, but then so is Wyn Percy, the evergreen Wyn Percy, who I thought had retired, as Martin Brundle comes up alongside Stirling Moss. Here we are, the man who never won the World Championship and should have done 4 times, Stirling Moss. Martin Brundle is going to go charge through on the inside and take Moss's 7th place away from him, and he does it.
Yes, indeed he does, and look at the steering wheels, look at the hands on the steering wheels, and these cars, you can really see the work. It's not like modern Formula 1 cars where the steering movements are so small. Here you go from lock to lock as you chuck from oversteer to understeer. Martin Brundle, Stirling Moss carrying, as he always did in his heyday, the number 7. Wyn Percy and Valentine Lindsay's D-Type just behind him. Willie Green bringing up the rear of that quartet in the red Ferrari, and Stirling being passed now by Wyn Percy, and Wyn Percy's going to have a go at Martin Brundle. Wyn Percy on the inside of Martin Brundle. Who is going to break latest?
D-Type versus D-Type, close run thing. Stirling Moss has got a grandstand seat. Willie Green can see all 3 of them in front of him and just hopes that one of them will make a mistake and give him a place.
Willie Green there at the back of that quartet as Martin Brundle, Wyn Percy, Stirling Moss and Willie Green all go through the tight chicane that brings them to
beautiful motor cars.
Aren't they wonderful? And just to put this sort of thing in perspective, if you wanted to buy a D-Type without special history, then it would cost you about £500,000. If you wanted to buy that DBR1 Aston Martin, then that would cost you £1.5 million. Let's go down to Steve in the studio. We're not going down to Steve in the studio. We're back with the Lavant Cup. And on Martin Brundle's tail, look at the brake lights go on as Wyn Percy has a little look on the inside. Doesn't get through. Martin Brundle's really settling into this D-type now. He's starting to enjoy himself.
He's got a long way to go, actually, Simon. Martin Brundle is 7th now. Nick Mason is some 11 seconds ahead of him. That's car number 26. And yes, it is the Pink Floyd Nick Mason. There's the race leader, Peter Hardman, in the Ferrari. And he really is. We're watching these battles behind him, but Peter Hardman is by far the fastest. Smith in second position, that's number 27.
Well, Smith is challenging, in fact, because Smith with the slightly battered front to that birdcage because he had an accident in practice on Friday. Smith is a 1/5 of a second behind Peter Hardman, and Peter Hardman in the front engine Dino. Smith in the little 2.8-litre 4-cylinder birdcage Maserati. They're as close as they could possibly be, and Hardman, a very, very competent historic racing driver. We've seen him so often drive the Aston Martin that today Stirling Moss is driving, but Hardman under real pressure now from Tony Smith, and Hardman has responded just a little bit. Hardman easing away from Tony Smith, the birdcage Maserati, called such because its chassis is made from a wealth of spaghetti-sized tubes, and the birdcage Maserati, a very successful racing car in its day. There, Peter Hardman in the Dino Ferrari, and a spin now.
The spinner there, off goes Frank Sidner. Now, he's obviously trying just a bit too hard. Frank Sidner is not a man to hang back when he comes up behind someone, and he will get his way if he possibly can. I guess he was trying to get through there, failed to do so. You see, he was having a battle with Walton's car, that's number 28, Rob Walton's car, and he's still running, so I don't think there was a collision. It was probably just a bit too close, couple of wheels on the grass. Thank you and goodbye.
It is very, very slippery, this circuit now, because we've had a lot of wonderful motoring from some wonderful, but in one or two cases rather leaky old cars. A lot of oil on the circuit. There's Wyn Percy in Valentine Lindsay's D-type. He's brought it into the pits. Wyn Percy, the West Country driver, out of the race as Mark Knopfler holds up his hand to wave past the leader. Mark Knopfler in his 300S Maserati number 23 is passed, and Hardman once more has Smith tucked in behind him. Tucked right in behind Smith, behind Hardman. Brian Redman a further 10 seconds down, still in 3rd place. Rob Walton is still 4th. Frank Sidner, recovering from that spin, is in 5th place ahead of Nick Mason. Martin Brundle and Willie Green 7th.
There they are.
There they are indeed.
Going through inside Dudley Mason Styron's 300S Maserati, and they're closing up now. The car number 11 you see is Ben Cousins' Ferrari. And Martin fairly eating up the space between them, but the gap between Martin and Mason now is down to under 7 seconds, and Martin is lapping much quicker than Nick Mason, so Martin is going to try to get into the top 6 World Championship scoring points if there was a World Championship, but there isn't.
Well, Martin's really enjoying himself. Willie Green with him as they lap Ben Cousins. I have a moment to say that Ben Cousins' father had a special tweed suit made to race in. He wanted to have a tweed suit over his fireproof overalls, and his son, Ben Cousins, is wearing the jacket of that suit over his Nomex overalls. And while we'll see Martin Brundle and Willie Green, Wyn Percy is down in the pits with Dave Beckett.
Win a disappointment for you because it's quite a race out there.
It was an awful lot of fun, and after racing so many years with Martin Brundle in touring cars and sports cars, yes, I was thoroughly enjoying it.
Who's your money on now?
Sorry, say again?
Who's your money on now?
I don't really know, to be very honest with you, because I wasn't following who was in front. I must say, actually, race results here are secondary to the fun we're all having. So, although I'm very disappointed, I would love to have brought the car home. It is such a wonderful weekend.
Do you know what the problem is?
Yeah, the cabin is filling up with oil smoke. It's a gearbox smell, and I don't really want to cause the owner a lot of aggro, a lot of expense, and it's too much smoke to be coincidence. So I'm afraid it's time to put it away.
Okay, bad luck, Wyn. Thanks very much.
And Stirling Moss is right up with Willie Green. Willie Green and Oh, they almost swapped paint. Willie Green going past Martin Brundle, and while this battle goes on, look at the green car because Stirling Moss is there too. Stirling Moss fighting right up to Martin Brundle. What a magnificent battle. V12 Ferrari, straight 6 Jaguar D-Type, straight 6 Aston Martin DBR1. Moss in the very car with which he won the Tourist Trophy and broke the sports car lap record here at Goodwood all those years ago. And Moss is going through on the inside of Martin Brundle. Moss is almost alongside Brundle as he got through. No, he hasn't quite. Martin Brundle trying to shut the door. Yes, he has. They're inches apart. Brundle gets his foot down, but Moss has the inside line as they go through Lavant and onto the straight. Moss leads, and he gives a little wave to Martin Brundle. Don't you love that, Murray?
69-year-old Stirling Moss has lost none of his skill, none of his talent. Fought his way past Martin Brundle, who you remember led Le Mans this year. And so he is one of the very best drivers of today in sports cars. There's Willie Green, there's Stirling Moss, and Martin Brundle is losing time. I wonder if he's got a car problem.
Well,
John Griffiths has just gone
just
past him.
delayed. They were lapping John Griffiths, but here is Stirling Moss going through, and you can see Martin sawing away at the wheel, Moss sawing away at the wheel. They're absolutely inches apart. Moss getting the inside line at Lavant. And what a hero Stirling Moss is. He's twice Martin Brundle's age, but he's still a great, great driver. Willie Green ahead of them in the Ferrari, but there is Stirling Moss, and all of this excitement, all of this battle has only been for 7th place, but that's all that these guys need. They want to go motor racing in the afternoon sunshine at Goodwood, and that's what they're doing.
And we're just over half distance now, lap 11 out of 21. Just to keep you in the picture of what's happening up front, it's still Peter Hardman in the red Ferrari leading, but only 1 second behind him. It's literally anybody's race. With him now is Tony Smith's Maserati Birdcage. There's the leader. Look back. I don't know who that is, to be quite honest.
Well, whoever it is, he's got a lovely place to watch the race.
I suspect it's Mark Knopfler. It is Mark Knopfler.
Yes, Mark Knopfler has stopped his 300S Maserati, and so he's able just to watch the race and enjoy the afternoon sunshine. Martin Brundle once more. The car, incidentally, belongs to John Coombs, himself a great driver in the early 50s. Oh, look at that sideways moment from Martin Brundle. He is flinging that car around.
Simon, do you notice that Martin, like all of them, is well in period? He's wearing a pair of Mark 8 aviation goggles, which I suspect he bought specially for the occasion.
Well, he comes over the start-finish line in 9th place now. Moss is ahead of him. Green is ahead of him. Nick Mason is 6th. Frank Sittner 5th. Rob Walton 4th. Brian Redman is still there in 3rd place. And still this battle for the lead between Hardman and Smith, who are separated now on the 12th lap by only a second. And Brundle holds his hand up.
I thought so. He's being caught past by Robin Lodge. To be honest, I was confident that it wasn't a Martin Brundle problem, because there's a real press-on racing driver. Out comes his hand to say, I'm sorry, folks, I've got a problem, got to pull out. Stirling Moss fought manfully past him. He's in the top 8. Willie Green ahead of him is 7th. Nick Mason is in 6th place. Frank Sittner is in 5th position. Rob Walton is 4th. Brian Redman is in 3rd place. Tony Redman is 2nd. Race leader is still Peter Hardman. Lap 13 out of 21 as Martin Brundle, comparatively slowly for him, tours in.
Yes, I think that the ex-Equipe National Belge D-Type Jaguar will shortly be coming into the pits.
Sounds rather rough, doesn't it?
It does indeed, and that number 15.
Oh, look at that! Willie Green and Stirling Moss, and they nearly collided. That would have been a very, very expensive accident. Willie Green momentarily onto the grass with his 2 left wheels, and Stirling Moss waved an admonitory finger at him. Don't you try that again, Willie, my boy. I may be 69 years old, but I can still do it.
Yes, look at this, as Moss goes round the outside of Willie Green, under braking for Woodcote corner. What a fantastic manoeuvre by Stirling. No, he just waves thank you. It's part of the Stirling psychology. When he's just humiliated you by overtaking you, he just says, thanks for letting me by. We see Peter Hardman absolutely sideways, working his way through the back markers in the more modern and rather more ungainly front-engine Dino with its tall rear. There is Tony Smith in 2nd place in the battle-scarred Maserati Birdcage. We're on lap 13. of the 21, and Peter Hardman still pressing on. And there's
Martin.
Yeah, Martin Brundle in the pits, explaining to John Coombs, the owner of the car. That's John Coombs, who was an entrant of so many great Jaguars here at Goodwood, and before that was a driver in Lotus Connaught and many other cars. 2.3 seconds is now Peter Hardman's lead, and Brian Redman 20 seconds further back.
Simon, I tell you what amazes me, we've only got one more race left after all the practice, qualifying and racing we've had. And that chicane, which was specially built out of bricks in the old days and has been replaced by polystyrene for safety reasons, simulated to look like bricks, has been completely untouched. People have spun in the gap, but they haven't touched it.
And down in the pits, we've got Dave Beckett with Martin Brundle.
Martin, what a disappointment for you. You look like you're really having fun out there.
Yeah, the car was going really well. I was moving forwards, but then I lost a cylinder, which I could just about live with. And then we lost 2 cylinders, and I could smell it a bit oily, and I thought there's no point breaking the engine.
You were moving sideways quite a bit as well. You gave Murray a few moments.
Yeah, he should have been in here with me, I tell you. That makes the 2-seater McLaren we did look a bit tame, I have to say. This car's alive, to say the least. But it was, I have to say, I really enjoyed myself. It was absolutely incredible. And then to be dicing with Moss into St Mary's is just, I can't explain it.
Thanks, Martin.
So there's 30, that's Burkhard von Schenk's Porsche, little RS61 Porsche, being caught and lapped by race leader Peter Hardman.
Well, Martin Brundle reckons he would have liked to have had you in the passenger seat. They're 2-seater cars, these, just like that 2-seater McLaren that you drove in with Martin Brundle, except, of course, this time the seats are side by side.
Well, I honestly would have liked to have been with him. He's a super driver, he's a super chap. It's a wonderful motor car. He's given me one highly stimulating ride in the McLaren. Another would have been magic at this magical occasion here at the Goodwood Revival meeting.
Peter Hardman, car number 5, that's the leading Ferrari. Look at him tossing that car sideways, winding on the opposite lock to cope with the understeer as the oversteer as the tail starts to come round. But Peter Hardman has now eased away from Tony Smith in the second place birdcage Maserati. 3.1 seconds the gap between leader Hardman and second man Tony Smith. Brian Redman having a rather lonely race in third place in the DBR2 Maserati, DBR2 Aston Martin, I should say, ahead of Frank Sittner, Rob Walton and Nick Mason.
Martin, Simon, just a little historical note as we watch the birdcage. Now there's race leader with the front engine Ferrari, and of course the great Enzo Ferrari was very reluctant to move to a rear engine car. He didn't do it until 1961 with the Sharknose Formula 1 car. And those front-engine sports cars of his, which won at Le Mans and so many other races, look at this, lovely motor car. And it still makes me feel very good about a wonderful, wonderful Mark constructor.
And it makes one feel very good about a wonderful, wonderful weekend here at Goodwood. The weather has been flawless, the cars have been magnificent, the driving has been very exciting.
Yeah.
If we were worried that the racing would be a parade, would be processional, then just watching the way these drivers are going completely banishes that fear. Peter Hardman in that comfortable lead, working his way through the back markers.
Well,
number 19 is Frank Sittner, and Frank Sittner now ahead of Rob Walton in the blue and white Maserati behind him. Frank Sittner's had one spin already on the oily surface. It is indeed the battle for fourth, and Nick Mason a further 20 seconds down, but Sittner is under real pressure from Rob Walton. Now we're on the 16th of 21 laps, and Sittner's going to have to get his trotter down.
Let's talk about cars. The Ferrari of Peter Hardman leads. In second place, the Birdcage Maserati, and in third place, it's Brian Redman's Aston Martin. 3 great names. Then that car, the Jaguar D-Type of Frank Sittner. Behind him, Tony Walton's Maserati Birdcage, so 2 Maserati Birdcages in the top 5, and Nick Mason going extremely well, and I'm just looking to see where he is now as he goes through. Nick Mason, that's car number 26, and he's in yet another Maserati. And they weren't all that successful and they weren't all that reliable when they were at their prime, Simon.
Well, they were briefly successful, but of course it is this matter of front and rear engines that you were mentioning. The Birdcage Maserati was perhaps the last successful front-engine sports car in the great endurance races like the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometres, and it was only when the Maserati decided finally, the Maserati team decided finally they would have to have a rear engine car and brought out the Type 62 and the Type 63. That was when really they lost their way, and by then Ferrari was stamping their authority with the rear engine Ferraris like the 250 LM of David Piper, which we've seen racing here this weekend. And Stirling Moss still pressing on. Stirling Moss 3 seconds now behind Nick Mason, and he is catching him fast. Stirling Moss in 7th place is closing on Nick Mason's Birdcage Maserati in 6th place. We could have a late battle there.
Stirling's been in at least 3 different makes of car here. He's been out the Van Wall that he made famous in 1957 when, with Tony Brooks, he won the British Grand Prix at Aintree. Here he is in the Aston Martin DBR, and he is in 7th place, and he's right up with Nick Mason now. So the battle between car 26 and car 7, and number 19 is Frank Sittner, 4th position, 4th, 5th, 6th, Sittner, Walton, Nick Mason is 6th, Stirling Moss is in 7th place. Peter Hardman leading the races on lap 18 out of 21, and he leads Tony Smith by just a mere 2 seconds.
Well, Stirling Moss continues with about 4 laps left to catch Nick Mason, and the gap between Moss and Mason is now only 4/5 of a second. Now, before you tell me, Murray, of course you're right. It's one thing to catch up, it's another thing to overtake, but certainly at the rate he is going, Stirling Moss in Aston Martin number 7 is closing on Nick Mason in the Birdcage Maserati number 26, and it could well be that we're going to see Moss being able to make up another place in the closing stages. Hardman, Smith, Redmond the top 3, Ferrari, Maserati, Aston Martin, Jaguar number 19, 4th, there it is, 28 Walton is 5th there. We wait for number 26, and there is Stirling Moss. Now, he gives a little wave at the car he's lapping, which actually was Willie Green.
Is still behind him,
yeah, Willie Green is following him through, and Moss has indeed passed Nick Mason. Moss is up to 6th, Willie Green is up to 7th. They've both passed Nick Mason. Stirling Moss has made a further place up. We're now on the 18th of 21 laps, and Stirling, who, as well as doing all the racing and demonstrating he's done, found time to come into our Meridian studio and have a nice chat with Jeff. There seems to be no end to the energy of the man.
The stamina of the man is mind-bending. I don't know how he does it all. If I could do any one of them, I'd be... Whoa! Peter Hardman is certainly not giving up, is certainly not slowing up. 2.4 seconds behind him. Well, there in the white and blue Maserati is Tony Smith, and he's second, and that does not look like 2.4 seconds to me.
Indeed,
Peter Hardman has lost time somewhere.
Yeah, I think Peter Hardman is being a little bit cautious through the traffic. And that's the important thing here, that there are so many differing cars, and indeed, it has to be said, to be fair, a lot of very differing talents. Some of the quick men really know how to extract the best from their valuable old cars. Some of the others are wealthy collectors who nevertheless wanted to make sure that their cars were here at Goodwood. There's Moss, absolutely on the limit. Way, he's almost on the grass there. Understeer, oversteer, coming out of Woodcote through the chicane, and Stirling, the years have rolled away. This circuit was where he had that near fatal accident on Easter Monday in 1962, which ended his racing career, but it was in 58 and 59 that he was driving this car. He said he loved the handling, he hated the gearbox, the cars were paid for by David Brown, who was a gearbox manufacturer, and Stirling Moss always says the only bad point about the car was the gearbox. But
the man who's won the Mia Emilia, the man who's won the Targa Florio, the man who didn't win the World Championship, as I've said before, it's a bit of a cliche, but for my book, one of the very greatest racing drivers of any kind of all time. Stirling Moss, then, he's going to finish in the top 6 if he can just keep going. We're on lap 20 now, only 1 lap to go after this. Tony Smith is making a supreme effort. He's closed the gap between himself and number 5, Peter Hardman in the red Ferrari, to just a whisker over 2 seconds. But I think Peter Hardman, metaphorically speaking, is home and dry.
Well, all the excitement from this race has come from Stirling Moss, from Willie Green, Frank Sittner indeed, who is still going well despite that spin in 4th place. but I'm finding the sight of Stirling Moss, whatever happens at the end of this race, the sight of Stirling Moss in the DBR1 Aston Martin in that curious shade of metallic pale green that the Works Aston Martins always wore. That, of course, is the scarlet of a red Ferrari, the prancing horse, and that car, number 5, is the Ferrari Dino 246S. It's a 1959 car. There's Stirling Moss once more, just lapping John Griffith's D-Type Jaguar. But the Ferrari that's in the lead, there it is once more, coming through the chicane. This car finished second in the 1960 Targa Florio, driven by Phil Hill, the American world champion, who is here today, and he starts his final lap. This is Peter Hardman on his last lap, 1.5
seconds. So Tony Smith is really pushing it. He wants to win, and he means to win. This is the last lap, as Simon has just said. The gap has come down from 2.5 seconds to 2, from 2 to 1.5 seconds, and it's closing. But Hardman will see that distinctive white and blue shape in his mirrors. He knows all he's got to do is make his car as wide as possible, which he can legally do, to win the Lavant Cup.
They lap one of the little Maseratis. They're in St Mary's now. This is Tony Smith in that lovely birdcage Maserati, a very effective piece of kit. And as they go down to Lavant Corner for the final time, what a wonderful weekend of historic motor racing we have had here at Goodwood. We watch Peter Hardman coming down the Lavant Straight for the final time. He can see the little blue and white birdcage Maserati in his mirrors, but he knows that provided he makes no mistakes in the final 2 corners, Woodcote Corner and then the chicane, all will be well. He's in Woodcote Corner now. A great sideways slide from Peter Hardman, but he's now got the chicane. The checkered flag is down here waiting. The birdcage Maserati is ever present, but today it will be the bridesmaid, not the bride, as Peter Hardman comes over the checkered flag. Peter Hardman wins. Tony Smith is second. Brian Redman is third with the Aston Martin, ahead of Sittner in the E-Type, Walton in the birdcage Maserati, and a magnificent 6th, car number 7, Stirling Moss.
Or even hopefully the groomsman and not the groom, as Peter Hardman wins. Tony Smith takes second.
Simon Taylor and Murray Walker, thank you very much. As far as I'm concerned, a race and a half. The expert's view from Derek Bell.
Well, it's just magnificent to see the great Stirling Moss with sort of drivers of that era actually mixing it with modern day drivers in the old machinery. I think it's absolutely outrageous.
And the great thing is to see the drivers working the car.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about open sports cars and the Formula 1 cars of that era. In current day cars, you can't see so much, you know, it's such a pity, because I think you need to see the driver working.
I think you can forget Formula 1 almost and stay with this, but in essence, this weekend, brilliant.
It's just the greatest motoring event I've ever been to in my life.
I know it's been a one-off, but we'll come back, won't we?
Well, I'm sure we will, won't we?
What's the inside information from Lord March?
I think so, without a doubt. I mean, he didn't do all this just for 1 year, I'm sure.
I'm sure he hasn't. No. All right, and you enjoyed your ride?
I've enjoyed it. It's been the most wonderful weekend to mix it with my heroes.
Walk home over the fields?
Yes, I think I might just take a walk straight across Madrid Corner.
All right, excellent. Derek Bell, thank you very much indeed. Oh, I've been dreading saying this. That's it. We have had a truly marvellous few days here. We've only brought you a couple of hours of it, but I'm sure you've had a real flavour of the event here. Tons and tons of money was spent in reviving this motor racing circuit. Let me just tell you, Goodwood has been well and truly revived. I simply have to say goodbye with words from Goodwood's heyday. It's been absolutely spiffing. See you again. Drive safely.
And that's it, it's all over. Or is it? He's still waving. Perhaps not.